proven method. Before I ever allowed agents to work within the company, it was just myself. I was personally selling about 150 homes a year. So as we have brought them into our system, allowed them to work the methods in which I've worked for many years, and our average is about 30 transactions or 30 home sales per agent. We just teach them how to do it the right way.
Hey everybody, Bernie Gallerani with Bernie Gallerani Real Estate, and we are bringing you our next episode here today on the 7 steps to 7 figures. And so this is just an exciting topic, and I have a great guest with me today, John Hoffman from Florida, who's been an agent for many years, who's going to aid in this conversation to help each and every one of you guys succeed to a 7-step, 7-figure income. So this topic is about your action plan along with your personal plan to support the business of 7 figures. So what we're talking about today is what are all the pieces that you have to have in mind, in place, and ready to go so it'll support all of that business that we've been talking about you doing over the last 4 or 5 or so 6 months. So John, thank you for being our guest today. And so if you can, we got a big topic today, and a lot of people are going to be watching this and getting a chance to get to know you a little bit. So you've been an agent for how long?
39 years.
39 years. Wow.
1986, I got licensed. I was 5. And but I've been doing this for a long time.
You wish.
Yeah,
So by almost 40 years.
yeah.
You might be the most seasoned person we've had in here so far. So
That wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah.
It's just a number, bro.
That's right. So 39 years in the business, living in Florida, right, in the Tampa area,
Yeah.
right? Always sold real estate there in Tampa?
No, actually, you know what? Maria and I went there, and for a year and a half, I was involved in the bagel restaurant we opened up, and I said, okay, well, this isn't going to make it, and so I right back into real estate. So there was a short little a break of real estate. I sold in Rochester, New York for 10 years, 11 years, moved to Tampa, and after a year and a half of the bagel business, and so for the last 27 and a half, 28 years, selling real estate in Tampa.
In Tampa, okay. So I know that you and I have talked over months about this program that we're doing with all these agents here in our community, and we send it even to MFO people, so a lot of people get to see it. And it's a lot of fun to be able to deliver this content. So we're talking about the 7 steps to 7 figures, and I thought you'd be a really great person to really kind of step people through the process of what not only the action plan, because we've talked about an action plan before, as we all know, but really the support side of that. So support of not only family support, meaning your wife, your kids, everybody buying into your process of wanting to go to a 7-figure income, but also the support that you're going to need within your company. So let's just start with family support if we can, because I know how many homes you and I just discussed. You said you sold over 2,000 properties personally, right?
Yeah.
And now you're running a team and you're working with people that way. How much for an agent really striving to make $1 million a year, how much and how involved does the family need to be in being behind you during this process of this goal?
Oh, it's critical. If you're married, right, your spouse needs to be behind you. They need to understand what you're trying to accomplish and how can they help is a common question that you should receive. And so from help motivate you, to encourage you, to hold you accountable, right? If you're having a bad day, bad week. Some agents have a bad week. They have a bad month, but if you want to keep it to a bad day, right?
So if this, let's say a wife or a husband, right? So if you have a spouse, knowing that you're going to be developing or taking a lot of time away from your family to try to develop a 7-figure business, how critical is that support is there?
It's on a scale of 1 to 10, it's a 9.5. So let me elaborate. So if you're going to be wanting to make $1 million in real estate, you're probably one of these people that if you're okay working 7 days a week, right?
Yeah.
You're okay being on the phone after 7 o'clock at night, going out with the family if you have children. So you really got to work with your spouse to have family time and work time. You need to be on the same page. And if you're the agent and you're working a lot, you've got to be very sensitive to your spouse's or significant other's needs for time, and also your children.
Right. It's a little bit of a balancing act, right? Because we all know that when we develop that kind of time to develop this kind of an income, you're really putting your personal life on hold to some degree, right? You have to shuffle that time more into your work than away from your family at times, correct?
Well, sure, because you think you need to be on call all the time as an agent. A client calls or a realtor's calling you at 8 o'clock at night, and you got to pick up the phone. And if you're watching a movie with the family, then you get up and leave, and the kids notice that, right?
Yeah.
So you've got to really, you've got to set up. And so like on my voicemail, it says if you're calling me after 7 o'clock at night, I'll call you the next day. Mm-hmm. If you're calling me Sunday after 5 o'clock, I will call you first thing Monday morning. Mm. So I want to set up that family time, and you don't want to burn out, so you need a break.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, do you call your accountant at 8 o'clock at night and expect them to pick up the phone?
Or my dentist or my doctor or anybody else like that, right? I mean, we don't call those people after hours because it's during their time, their family life, right? It's interesting, too, because you just said something that I think a lot of people need to take some consideration in here, and that you can work a long schedule as you need to do in order to get your business off the ground to making this kind of money. But the second part of that is you also got to put a limit or a timeline on what you are willing to give. I remember my coach used to say to me, when you get home, 7 o'clock, your phone goes off. And I would say, well, how come I leave your cell phone in your car, because now it's family time. And so I said to the coach, and I had learned a lot through coaching, but I said, and my coach at that time was Monica. I said, well, how do I do that? Because I have other friends that call me. And she says, no, what you have to do is you have to get two phones, a work phone and a personal phone. And your work phone is where your clients have, and your personal phone is what your wife calls you on. It's what your friends call you on. And so that was something that I did where I had now two different cell phones, so I could leave the business phone in the car, have that kind of message on there, and then I could just go and be with my family and not be distracted. A lot of agents have a hard time with that, guys, and that is separating. How involved do you think agents feel like they need to be for their client 24/7? Because that's not really what you and I did. We were never totally involved with our clients 24/7. We draw a line in the sand based on that time.
Well, your clients don't have an expectation of you calling them back at 8 or 9 o'clock at night. It might be convenient for them to call you when they're home, and they would call me and leave me a voicemail saying, hey, John, I got a question about this. When you get a chance, can you give me a call back anytime? Tomorrow's fine. Right? Now, if I were to pick up the phone, hey, John speaking, I'm like, oh, hey, John, I got a question for you. They were going to leave a voicemail.
Yeah.
They get me on the phone, so now I'm training them to call me at 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah. And they're thinking it's okay.
It's okay.
Yeah.
That expectation.
Yeah.
So you've got to set it. And I tell my team members, listen, if you get a voicemail, someone's calling you at 8 o'clock at night, excuse yourself if you got a young family and the kids aren't down yet. Go to the bathroom, listen to the voicemail. Mm-hmm. And if it's critical to call back, mm-hmm. well, then call back. But it's usually not critical. You've got to set up balances. And to tell you the truth, Bernie, the only reason why I think agents feel a need to pick up the phone at 8, 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, it's because they didn't work hard enough during the day and they feel guilty.
It's just so funny that you say that. That'll be actually probably a different video in that our need to feel needed and or justify the commissions that we're earning, right? And that's a whole other topic. I'll probably do a whole video on how realtors behave and how they actually get in the way of their own transactions because they're trying to justify their commissions inside the deal. I know you know what it is that I'm talking about. So let's talk about like the children, the support of the children. How do you buy the fact that dad or mom is not going to be there? And let me just explain to you. So I ran it the way I ran it. I'm not sure I would run it exactly the same way again, but how I ran it was I worked from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., typically Monday through Friday, and then I had some prospecting hours on Saturday, some prospecting hours on Sunday evenings. But a lot of times I wasn't home for dinner, right? And I was there for my kids to hang out with them at night before they went to bed and those kinds of things. But a lot of times I wasn't there during the homework time because I was working, and my wife, Wendy, was there to support that. But we also had our kids buy into our program, right? You sit down with our children and say, this is what we're doing, and this is the kind of life we're trying to create. What did you do with your kids? Because you've been in the business for a lot of years. Your kids were probably not even born when you started, I wouldn't guess. How did you solve that as a family dynamic with your kids?
I made a real conscious effort with the kids. Like I was involved in all their sports. I coached flag football, coached Little League, would umpire Little League just to be around the kids and to be seen. It's all about scheduling, right? You've got to schedule that time. And you can also, have your kids get involved in the business. Like if I would go and put lock boxes on, I would take my sons with me and I would give them $1 to hold the lockbox to hand it to me at the front door.
Oh, awesome.
Right. And we'd make little games about, they'd come back to me and I said, listen, if Dad can get 5 contracts this week, everyone's going to get a $5 bonus.
Yeah.
So when I came home, they're like, did you do it, Dale? Did you get a contract signed? Right. And because we actually made them, to kind of get involved a little bit.
Yeah.
But you've got to be able to set that side apart. I have an agent that she just worked. We're just talking about her. Megan, she was showing properties up 2 days before she gave birth to the baby, right? And so she's got a great goal, and we've worked on her business plan. And I said, okay, we're going to come up with a schedule for you to be able to achieve what you want to achieve, right? And so that means at certain times of the day, until she can come back full time, she's going to be doing certain things. Now, she's got a 18-month-old and a 1-month-old, and we're working on her to be able to reach the goals that she needs to reach for her and her family. So whatever your situation is, there's a way to create a schedule and a system and a business plan that's going to allow you to achieve certain goals. But you've got to have the mindset that you've got the flexibility and you're going to be able to do this. If you throw your hands up and say, well, I'll never be able to do this, well, then you never will.
But I think some of the challenge and the dynamic of the support at home is getting your spouse, probably more so than your kids, but getting your spouse to understand that you can't always be home if the plumber needs to be there, or you can't always be there if a contractor is going to your house, right? Because you have a schedule and you have to have that support from your spouse. Also for the spouse explaining this to the children, that dad or mom is on a schedule and dad's not just going to be able to pop home, or mom's not going to be able to pop home whenever they want. So that's always a hard thing, I think, for a family dynamic, and more so difficult probably for the agent who's trying to develop a 7-figure income is the level of discipline it takes to stay on your schedule.
It's the most important thing you can do. When I signed up for coaching with Mike Ferry 25 years ago, I called Maria and got her permission. It was a decision for the two of us.
Yeah.
I had a 2-year-old and a newborn, and the pressure was on, and Maria wasn't working. We would stay-at-home mom, which I think is a harder job than selling 100 homes a year in real estate. But it was a team decision.
Yeah.
And these decisions need to be team decisions, and I think you try to involve the children into these decisions to get their input.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. And I love this conversation because one of the things that I identified with at selling homes at the level I did was that if you don't have the full support of the spouse, it doesn't work. And I've actually seen agents that I thought had a tremendous amount of potential, and they actually started off, the gates opened, they ran like, they were trying to finish the Kentucky Derby in first place, and then they get somewhere around corner, turn number 1, sell, 20, 30 houses in, 8-10 months. And then the spouse starts saying, well, when I get home, I want my dinner on the table and you're working too much, or, you're never around, hang out with the kids. And so then it messes around with the agent's mindset. And so if you don't really have full buy-in from your spouse, I would just suggest if you decide that you are working towards the 7 steps for 7 figures, that you sit down and get the buy-in from your spouse, and then also come up with a really great, cool way to get your kids involved, as you said you did. And I had my kids involved too with that process also.
So you can also talk about the benefits of the 7-figure income, right?
Yeah.
To get the spouse more on board if they're not, or anything else. If we're able to achieve this goal, and as we move towards it, this is what we're going to be able to do. Maybe a bigger house or car, give more money to charity, do more for goodwill. There's a lot of things and opportunities that open up the door. There's a reason why agents want to make a 7-figure income. So having that conversation is, I think, also something that's very important as you continue to grow towards it.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? Because when I started this podcast of 7 Steps, 7 Figures, I started this in January at the start of the year. So we're now doing our first episode was just explanation, and so we're probably in podcast number 5 on this, where we're doing our 5th topic on these 7 topics. But what's interesting is realizing when I started this, I thought 7 steps or 7 figures is so beyond where most realtors who may be watching this are today. That it might seem a little confusing and overwhelming. But if you develop even if you're brand new, if you start working on these skills of developing a habit of having these conversations with your spouse, telling them what you're trying to accomplish, sit down with your kids to get a buy-in, certainly makes it a lot better. The second part of this, John, is the support of staff, right? You and I both know, because we both have had staff for many years, that has helped us. No agent out there who sells 100 or 200 homes a year who makes 7 figures does it by themselves. They might be the only agent that is listing or selling or working with these buyers, but they have a lot of staff and a lot of support within their organization and their structure. Let's talk a little bit about the need of that, right? So I'm always been a promoter within my company to make sure that all of my agents have personal assistants. So everybody here has close TCs, transactional coordinators, listing managers, sign runners, for what the one purpose and one purpose only. And that's what I want you to highlight here a little bit, is staying focused on the schedule, which is not managing the files. Let's talk a little bit about, if you don't have staff, if you don't have staff, how challenging is it for an agent to get to 7 figures if they don't have any help?
It's impossible. You're never going to get to 7 figures unless your average commission check is $100,000.
Yeah.
Or $50,000. That's just not going to happen. It's unrealistic to think that you can get to 7 figures, and so if your average commission check is, $10,000 and you want 7 figures, do the work.
What kind of agent, though? Because I've talked to a lot of realtors. I think you'd probably agree, where they're like, I like being fully involved. I don't want anybody else touching my files. What kind of thinking is that? Is that because you've heard it? I know I've heard it.
That used to be me, and so what it is that if that realtor that wants to touch everything, if they owned a restaurant, they would be your valet, park your car, then they'd run in and pour water for you, then they would come and ask you if you want a drink, and then they would come back and take your order. They would go cook it, then they would bring it back. That it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
Right? And so what you've got to understand as an agent is that admin are going to be better at admin work than I would ever be. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And if you have the right team and you train them to do it and you give them the space to do it, mm-hmm. even if they do it at 85% of what you think it should be done, mm-hmm. that's going to be good enough.
Mm-hmm. It's fun. We've had one of our longest transactional coordinator's been with us for 10 years, Rachel, and she's closed between 300 and 350 files every year for 10 years. And then I'll get a new agent who comes in and just says, well, I don't really trust anybody else. And I have to say to him, like, you understand that this lady over here
closed 3,500
has had 3,500 successful sales, and you're on your 4th deal and you don't trust her. And that's the hardest part, is people they feel that somewhere along the way they have to feel like, if I do it all, I feel like I'm doing it right. And what I would say to you is, you're probably still so far behind what our transactional coordinators could do in regards to the amount of experience they have. That is more of a need than it is a true reality, right? The true reality is that you're not more experienced if you're on your 4th, 6th, 8th, or let's just say your 200th deal. You're not as experienced as someone who has closed 3,500 transactions.
So let's say that you've closed 600, 700, 1,000 transactions. Why would you even want to oversee that transaction? Because time is money, right? We talked about balancing family and everything else. So if agents, because my name is on all the listings, and mm-hmm. agents call me all the time, and I say, well, you know what, please call the office, talk to Danielle, she'll help you. I don't have the file. So, and then the same thing with Debbie, is one of our closing managers, mm-hmm. is that if it takes it off my plate, it's easier to do more transactions. Mm-hmm. I can do more money-making activities because admin work, in my opinion, is absolutely critical to make sure that the process gets closed, but it's holding you back from generating more business, so it's holding you back from reaching 7 figures if you think that you need to be looking at all the files. Imagine you get to the point as a realtor, you get a pending transaction, and you only get involved if there's a problem. So when we talk to our clients and talk to the sellers, and we're like, okay, well, you're only going to hear from John if there's a problem, so I hope John doesn't call you.
Yeah. We have a good friend, Deb, up in Nebraska, and I will never forget what she said to me. And when she lists the properties, she'll say, you're going to be hearing from my assistant, and we'll give her assistant's name. And she says, you're really not going to hear from me unless there's an issue getting your home sold. And I really hope you don't have to hear from me, because that means I'm going to be calling you for a price adjustment on the property or price improvement. And she would say this she says this to him in the presentation.
We do the same thing.
Oh, yeah. I don't really teach that here, but I love it. And that is, you don't really want to talk to me, because if you're talking to me, then there's an issue. If you're talking to my assistant, everything's going right, then we're heading towards a successful sale.
If you're going to call me during the listing process, I can't help you. Danielle's got the file. I don't. I'm usually on other listing appointments. I'm not in the office. I'm in the office for a few hours every morning, but I'm on listing appointments and other activities for the business. Mm-hmm. So please contact the admin. That's why they're there.
Yeah. So why do you think? Let's go a little deeper on why you think the biggest hang up is for agents doing that. Like, why do they have a problem trusting? Is it, well, maybe the better question is, do they not trust somebody else, or do they not feel like they want to take a risk in paying for an employee when they think, because they pretty much, if you're an individual agent, you're probably okay, but you may dream of maybe selling more homes, but then the risk of now having an employee and paying those expenses.
So that's the first hire, right? So a great story happened to me. Monica Reynolds was my coach as well. And Monica was the first person, or maybe the only, to publish 2 books on hiring admin assistants for real estate. Mm-hmm. So I hired my first admin, and 2 weeks later on one of my coaching calls, I'm like, you know what, I'm a little concerned about this. I've got this payroll that I'm responsible for, and blah, blah, blah. And she's like, John, didn't I tell you about admin remorse? I said, no, what's that? Well, every time you hire your first admin, you start questioning whether you should, and if you're wasting money because you're watching to make sure they work feverishly 8 hours a day.
That's funny.
Right?
I appreciate that.
So I went through that, and I think everybody does.
Yeah.
And so but here's the thing, is that if you're going to hire an admin and you're doing, say, 40 to 40 transactions a year, buyers and sellers, that used to be the threshold for needing an admin. Yeah. And if you hire that person, that will give you the time to generate more business and make more money. So hiring that $40,000, $50,000 a year admin, you should be able to take advantage of that and increase your income by at least $150,000 to $200,000, because it's freeing up all that time.
Yeah.
So it's going to be up to the agent to take advantage of that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're walking down this path, and we probably could do a 3-hour podcast on all the behavioral thought processes that realtors go through in order to try to grow their business, and the creative avoidance conversations they have. Because what I would say to you 100% is correct in what you said, but yet part of them love the creative avoidance issues that come with talking to another agent or creating some sort of a distraction off the thing they know how to do the most, or the thing they should do the most, which is lead generation.
Well, and it's an avoidance, because now that I've got an admin doing a lot of this paperwork and calling and scheduling inspections and teaching them how to negotiate repairs and talk to the lenders and blah, blah, blah. So now you've got an additional 3-4 hours a day that you need to fill. So how do you fill that? And if you can fill it with lead generating and going on more listing appointments, or if you're still working with some buyers, work on focusing on averaging your average sales price, and there's ways that you can generate more business and even increase your average sale price. If you attack that effectively, it makes sense. If you don't, you're going to hire somebody and you're not going to generate any more income.
Yeah, I love what John's saying here, because we both run teams, so we can relate to the behavior the behavior we see from agents today. And what's so fun is I just took what I did as an agent, as an individual agent, where I had a personal listing manager who ran my listing inventory, and then a transactional coordinator who took care of my transactions, and then somewhere in there, kind of a runner and an assistant. So I had 3 people involved with that process of our company. And for a while, in the very beginning, I would say for the first few years, it was my wife. And so I remember that year, she closed 168 files that I had done that year, and she was like overwhelmed with all of that. But it even got to a point for me where I was so bought into the Mike Ferry system in managing my time that, and Mike used to say this, I'm sure we got this from coaches also, is these are the 4 or 5 things we should be doing, right? So you get 4 or 5 things, and not one of those is taking care of administrative work or calling an agent back if there was an issue during the time we were prospecting. And so what I find, though, is that agents find creative avoidance issues where they may have an assistant, which all my team members have. Every agent in my company has personal assistants that help them move along. My goal was to implement the system that I drove under for so many years and apply that to the business that they're trying to build. But what I found most of the time, what happens is the agent uses creative avoidance to not do the thing they have in their schedule, to get on the phone, call agents because there's a fire going on, where I would promote and say, well, let your assistant do that. That's what your assistant's job is. So it is literally like a juggling act trying to get the agent to buy into this concept of staying focused on their lead generation time. Do you find that was a challenge for you at all, or with your team?
No, it still is. I mean, you know, how many times do agents schedule home inspections or walkthroughs at 9 o'clock in the morning? Right?
A lot.
And you and I were
and we would never do that.
We would never do that.
No.
Right?
No.
I would never do that. And then they go, well, I've got to do, like we talked earlier, 7, 8 o'clock listing appointment. I said, well, why did you do that? Why didn't you tell them, well, they work 8, 9 till 5, and that's what's convenient for them. I said, well, did you ask them, do they go to the dentist? And what time do they go to the dentist? And I've asked clients that, well, I normally leave work early. I said, well, I think, talking about getting your $600,000 houses might be at least as important as a teeth clean, right?
That's funny. I love that.
I mean, it's just, it's interesting. It's the confidence and it's knowing it. And then you've got to have built-in accountability at work, right? And if you set up accountability and you realize and you get focused and you can do this, getting agents to come into the office. So right now I get up, I'm like you. I'm usually up by 4:15, 4:30 in the morning. I drink my coffee, and then I'll look at my emails. I'll look at everything that's come on the market, and I start working at home, until 7 o'clock, and I get to the office, but by 8:50 still, and to see who of our team is going to show up in the morning. So the agents that actually get it, that are self-disciplined and have accountability and family support, and they understand. And so I ingrain in my agent's head, well, listen, if you absolutely, for whatever reason, you got a goal of 20 contacts a day, let's say, and you can't come in one morning, not a problem. So that means you're going to get 80 contacts in, and you got to make up those other 20 on Saturday or Sunday.
Wow.
Right? I wouldn't go home. If I didn't hit my daily contact goal, I would stop at the grocery store, and the woman checking me out, I buy a bottle of water. I said, did I see you at my open house last Saturday? And she looked at me and go, no, I was. I said, oh, you look very familiar, but have you thought about buying or selling real estate anytime
You're
soon?
breaking the ice with that conversation, right?
And I'd go to the meetup. I would talk to 3 or 4 people at the grocery store. I wouldn't go home till I hit that contact.
I love that.
Right? And so it's the self-discipline, it's the accountability that you've set up, because I believe anybody with the right mindset and doing the tasks they need and the right accountability could make 7 figures.
Years ago, I had an accountability partner, and I had to make X amount of contacts every day. And so I was on a listing appointment, and I was heading back, and I got stuck with the freeway being shut down. I was like stuck on the interstate. And so after about an hour of just sitting on, the whole interstate was shut down. And so I realized that there's just no way I'm going to make my contacts because, I can get back to the office or whatever.
Right.
And I didn't have anybody's phone number to make any phone calls with me other than the listing appointment I just left because I had that folder. And I remember I called my accountability partner and said, hey, man, you're not going to believe this. I came, 3 or 4 short. He's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, well, I told him the story I just said. He goes, get out and go knock on the doors of the cars in front of you or behind you. And he says, I'm sure we know everyone's in their car, and hand out your card and just say, hey, I'm sitting here and I'm a real estate agent, want to buy or sell real estate. So, man, talk about uncomfortable.
Did you do it?
I did do it. And I thought,
awesome.
Okay. And so it was only, so I didn't have to go far because there was a car in front of me, a car beside me, but I actually did it and handed my card out. And I got in the car and I called him back. I'm like, dude, I can't believe I just did that. How embarrassing. He's like, no, but you stayed totally true to what you committed to. And it's fun and it's interesting is that how many times as agents, when we were selling at high levels, did we contemplate not wanting to do our job, but yet still did it regardless?
Yeah, on a regular basis.
A lot, huh?
Yeah.
Like a lot of times.
You get up and you're tired. Oh my God! And you had a bad day, or whatever, bad week, or something happened. The deals you didn't hit your listing goal for 2 weeks in a row, and you're like, "What's wrong?" Blah blah blah. But you learn. But you learn a lot of things, right? And like the advantage I think that all of your agents have, and I think my agents have, is the experience that we've had for selling so many properties. And like not going on bad listing appointments, right? Mm-hmm. That's a waste of time, and asking the right questions, because time is your best asset. Mm-hmm. And I think that if
we're not getting any of that back, right?
We're not getting any of that back. And if you can really work as hard as you can and make the best use of your time, you're not going to be as stressed out. So in other words, I was coaching with Mike Ferry and had a client. Sold 40 homes, and he was telling me he works 12 hours a day, 6 days a week. And I'm like, well, what the hell are you doing all day? You're only selling 40 homes, and you're telling me you're working. You're not working a lot during the day. You're hiding, right? And so when we actually deep down into a schedule, he was really working around 5-6 hours a day.
Can I'm going to say something here because you just made a whole bunch of people mad right now, right? Which I know you don't care, either do I. but here's what he's saying, and this is a tough one, because I know a lot of agents who sell 25 or 35 homes and they're totally overwhelmed, right? And it's really a time management problem. They think they're busy, but they're really not. They're not all that. They would buy into the fact that they're busy, but in the reality, what they're doing is they're just wasting their time and energy convincing themselves that they're busy. And in reality, if you're selling 30 homes a year, and if we're upsetting people, I guess that's okay. But you probably have a lot of time in there that you're wasting, or you're wasting time and not even realizing that you're wasting time. Would you agree with that? Like because they're not staying on a focused schedule and a purposeful schedule that has timelines in between each hour or 2 hours or 3 hours that they should be doing?
They allow themselves to get distracted in transactions is one of the number one sources, and I see it every day. This transaction might be falling apart. There's a problem, and there's an issue with the inspection, and all of a sudden now that agent's going to stress out about that, talk to 3 other agents about it, right? They're going to call their spouse, and they get frustrated, and they're going to waste 3 hours in a day on something that they have no control over.
That's exactly right. It's interesting, and for those that are listening, to kind of give you a contents for what John and I have experienced, is you've closed about 2,700 homes or so, right, in your real estate career yourself. I've closed probably around 1,600. You're much older than me.
I am.
And much more seasoned.
And better looking.
And that's right, and better looking. And so, but if you look at it between us, we have about 4,500 transactional sales between the two of us. And it's the one battle that we've all dealt with is organizing our time and staying focused, because it's really easy to get off focus. And number 2, making sure that we always have enough staff to support the needs of the goals that we're trying to have. So, when it got to the point now where not only do you have transactional coordinators, right, where we have several transactional coordinators today, so there's an added expense that we had to endure not only do I have a listing manager, but my listing manager had to have an assistant, right? And then my operations person who helps run the company, he's a salaried position, along with his personal assistant. My wife, along with her personal assistant, and then all of the ISAs and people that do on the phone, so all of that staff. And so I guess I'm saying this, that you don't just grow into saying, okay, I'm going to have all these personal assistants. You take one step at a time, you get somebody to help you, and then you build off of that while you organize your schedule, keep your schedule tight. And then as your business grows from that assistant, you then add another piece or component to that, right? Because you and I have done this for so many years that for us, it doesn't seem like a big deal to hire a bunch of staff people if we need them. But for somebody who's listening to this who doesn't have any staff, says, gosh, that just seems very expensive. I think what you'd say, and I think you'd agree, is it's expensive to do it, but it's much, much more expensive to never do it.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, you hire staff to help you grow, right?
Yes.
And so as you continue, but you want to hire smart, and you want to train them, and then you want to give them the room that they need to do their job.
And you hire staff to help you grow, and you also hire staff to buy back your time, right?
No,
however that time is spent. I mean, if that time is spent with you prospecting more and generating more income, that's financially a great support system to have you grow financially. But even if you haven't had staff to buy back your time to spend a little more time with your family, then how do you put a price tag on that? Right? I don't think you really do. So I think either way, you got to have a good level of support in the staff area in order to ever see a 7-figure income.
So let's look at it this way, because you brought up a really good point earlier, and I think that this is an issue that some people have in their head. So you've got a young family, right? And you're concerned about growing your business and putting in that effort because you don't want to be away from the family, which is completely legitimate. Mm-hmm. So I think it would be easier, correct me if I'm wrong, if you're a single person or a couple with no kids, you should be able to get to a 7-figure income with a little bit less stress and faster than if you've got children.
100%.
Okay. So take the pressure off you and say, this is going to be a little bit of a balancing act. I'm going to be working towards that 7-figure income, and I can really put the pedal to the metal once the kids are a little bit older, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you recognize that and you're actually growing, knowing that you're balancing everything and you can actually move faster in the future, plan for it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's so. Elisa on our team, who actually did the Bernie Bootcamp with me last month, she was very young when she started, no kids, not married, anything like that, right? And so she could dedicate all of her time where putting in, let's just call it 70 or 80 hours a week, what else was she going to do, right? And so she was really disciplined, or is still disciplined in that area. Now, still not married and still don't have kids, but she's not even 30 years old yet, and she's a multimillionaire because of her efforts in the things that we've taught her.
So that time she's putting in might change when she gets married.
That's exactly right. And so we talk a lot about that. Like, if you're going to do it now before the kids and the spouse comes about, because you're going to want to spend a lot more time with that family. So what's interesting about her is she started young, but she played this game so correctly in that I'm going to work really hard while I can. I'm going to stack up as much money in my retirement as possible. And then now she's going to sell over 100 she'll sell about 115 homes this year. So you look at her income level with her investments and her retirement portfolio that she's saving for. I mean, another couple of years, she probably never has to work again anyway. But what's cool is she's doing it all before she has all this family responsibility. She literally, I think, could wind it back a couple, 2 or 3 days a week and still sell a whole bunch of homes and make a bunch of money because she's built such a foundation and she doesn't need to prove anything really to anybody else.
She can have enough of a support team.
Correct.
Right? In her place where she could work less hours and hire some additional staff, ISA, buyer's agents, whatever, on herself, or whatever she wants to do, anyone wants to do to get to 7 figures. You can have your own little team around you and not have to work as hard.
Yeah, and that's what's so fun about like doing this stuff for all of you guys is interviewing people like John who have had, we'll call it 4 decades if we can, of experience. And those kinds of realtors aren't around that do
5 decades. Actually, the 80s, the 90s, 2000, 210, 220.
Wow. You're old.
I am.
Looking good, though, for 75? No. I'm just messing with you. Yeah. You started when you were 10, right? 10 or 12?
5.
Yeah.
I'll be 66.
But what's really cool, and John and I have been friends for 20 years, so we can always joke around with each other and have a good time. But what's fun for all of you guys, and I hope you don't look at this as it being too overwhelming with this conversation. It's a discipline. Life's a discipline. This business is a discipline. What we are expressing to you is just disciplines we've learned in time. So you just take one step at a time, right? We're going through 7 steps. Just which one are you going to apply? Which one are you going to work on this month, this quarter, this year to continue to keep improving your skills? I want to thank you for joining me today and helping share all this great educational stuff with everybody here. Don't forget, guys, success is never convenient, and you have to make changes in your life based on the level of success that you want. And it doesn't just show up and meet you where you are. You have to actually listen to things like this and navigate your level of success through changing your behavioral process and your action process to order to increase your business to a level that will meet the dreams that you and your family have. So I want to thank you for joining me on this Bernie Bootcamp. We'll be talking to you guys again next month with another topic. Everybody have a great day.